Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to implement a time series chart in Flutter using the Flutter charts library. So here is my application running on an emulator, and this is the chart that we're going to build in this tutorial. So it's basically a time series chart using the charts Flutter library. So it uses the date as its x-axis and the number of calories consumed in a certain day as its y-axis, so it's a food tracking context for this chart. And here we have add food entry, so we can add food. So let's say we have 1,000 calories on a certain date, June 16th, and then we click OK, and you can see the chart changing as new data is being added to it. So now let's say we do 2000 in December 14th. Now we can see that December, the chart now goes out to December because now we have a data point right here, 2000. So this is how our application, our finished application will look like. So now I'll give the tutorial for this application, or how to implement this chart. So first we have to create a Firebase project. So this application uses Firebase as its database, so it uses the real-time storage feature of Firebase. So if you don't have a project, just create a project, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you should be able to create it, and then you'll be able to download a Google services.json file. Where you need to place this file is in the Androids folder. So once you have your application set up, actually let's cover the application first. So once the Firebase project is set up, just go over to my GitHub repo for this application right here. I'll paste this link in the description so you can go to it easily, and go to the starter template branch, and then just clone this app. Since it's in a Android mini project's main repo, you'll have to clone the main repo first and then extract simple material app. So this is the application we'll build. I'll see if I can make a separate repository out of it, because you probably don't want to download all this extra source code. So I'll look into that. If not, you can get it from here. Next, once you have downloaded it onto your local system, just open it up using a coding editor. I'm using VS Code. Once you've opened it up, now we can move on to that step. So Firebase will give you a Google services.json file. You can place it in the Android folder, app, and then go to app, and then Google services.json. You have to place it right here, and this is done so that we can connect our application with the Firebase project we have just created. And it's important that you do it in Android app folder location exactly. Otherwise, Firebase will not be able to initialize our application with our Firebase project. So now that that's done, we can go to our application or project in Firebase, and then click real-time database. So I already have a database, but let's say I'm doing it for the first time. So this is what you'll see. Click on create database, select a region, go to next, select start in test mode. And it's important to start in test mode because that allows us to write and read into the database. So then click enable, and you should be able to create the database. Once that's created, we can go to our database, and we should be good on here. So here you see some records I've created. So now that the database is done, one last thing we have to make sure, just make sure the rules for the database is read true and write true. Otherwise you won't have permission to post to the database or read from it. Next, so once you've imported the application, we have to run the following command: Flutter pub get. So running this command installs all the dependencies listed in the pub YAML file, pubspec.yaml file. So these are all the dependencies that are listed that are required by this application, and doing this command will install it. Alternatively, you can click this button, get packages, to install all the dependencies. Next, we can go over to our main.dart file, and so this is just a generic Flutter application setup. We have void main async. In the main method of this application, we first call widgets flutter binding ensure initialized to get an instance of the widgets binding class and allow us to set up Firebase. Next, we set up Firebase via await Firebase initialize app. After that, we say await shared preferences services service init. And this is used to set up the shared preferences package, which allows us to store and cache values on disk. Finally, we call run app to inflate the my app widget and attach it onto the screen. Next, we have the my app class right here. This is the root widget of our application, and it renders my homepage class as its homepage. And this is the widget that is responsible for rendering the date time chart widget, which contains the time series chart that we're building. Next, in the build method, we can see we're rendering date time chart. So that's what you see here. Now let's go to utils, utils and database services. So what we're doing right now is defining a service class. That this class is responsible for connecting with the Firebase real-time database that we just created. So what we have to do is add some code to it. So let's see here. So we initialize database service, database reference, food track ref. So again, this is a food calorie tracking type of context that we're using for the chart. So I named it food track appropriately, and we have a table called food track, and then we're gonna need today's date time instance. So to do that, we just do date time.now here, date time.now month, date time.now day, and we can now code the only method for this application, which is add food track data. Let me finish typing it out and I will explain shortly. And basically we're awaiting calories, track entry, calories created on food track entry date to string. So what we're doing here is this method is used to push the new food track entry record up to the Firebase real-time database, and this real-time this table has records of this format. So it has calories, which we're getting from this food track entry class, which we'll shortly create, and then created on, which is the date, converted to a string. And here we're getting a reference to that Firebase real-time database table, and it's called food track. And here we're pushing this record onto that table. So now let's go over food track entry. So this is the class used by our charts time series chart instance in providing the X and Y values for the time series chart that we're building. So we have our date, which is our X-axis, and our Y-axis is our calories. This is our model, which we'll use. Next, we'll go to the main file or class in this tutorial, which is datetime chart. So let's begin coding this out, and I will type first and explain later. So actually no, so we have data, so let's explain here. So data, this variable will hold the resulting map string dynamic object from the database reference dbref object. The data will be populated after the database table records have been sent from the Firebase real-time database instance. Then we have chart data. So this variable will hold an instance of list chart series food track entry date time, which will be used to render, which will be used as data for the charts. And then we have init state. So init state is a lifecycle method that will be fired before the build method, and it's responsible for calling fetch chart data. So in fetch chart data, we have to code out the following. So let me pull it up right here. So some parts I will copy and paste for the interest of time, and some parts I will type out in order to explain it better. So we have a database reference, dbref, and then we're going to say dbref once, then database event, map non-calories. And let's speed things up here. And I will explain shortly, just hold on as I set up this function. So we have our ones here, and then we have another one here, and close it off right there. And then we have coming right there. And as you see, it's quite intricate, just the syntax of it. But basically what we're doing here is we have database ref, and then we're getting a reference to the Firebase Fire database instance. Then we say once, and once we fetch, we connect to the database reference, we're going to get all the data and load it into this map object. Then we're going to iterate through the food track tables values and it's called food entry. Then here we're basically storing it in calories by date map, which is another mapping object, and this is basically a string and a number. So the string would be the date of the object, and the num is the calories of that specific date. Then we bring out calories by date map. So this list is going to store food track entry instances. And what food track entry is, if we remember from last time, it's basically date and then calories. So the date, which is a string, will be stored as the date field, and then the num, which is the calories, will be stored as the calories field. Right here we can see food track entry, entry time, int parse. We're parsing the key, which is the date. We're parsing the value to an integer, which is the calorie amount, and the date will be the key. And then right in here we're sorting it. So as you see in the application right here, this application is ordered from least to greatest, meaning earlier dates come first and later dates come last. So it's in ascending order, and that's because of this logic right here. So we're sorting it, and then we have calories by date map, and we're storing the chart data in this specific format so that we can use it. But hold on as I figure out a way to do this easier, because this is taking up quite some time. Okay, yeah, so that's better. Then result chart data is used and uses chart data. So basically we're doing a bunch of stuff here, and we're just filtering and making the data from the real-time database so that it fits this format of having a food track entry class object, and this is what represents each entry point that we see here. These data points are all food track entry instances that are represented in the chart. Then we do a set state to set the state variables, date and data and chart data. So next we can go to the add food button. Give me a second. Yeah, add food button. So we have return icon button, and we have an icons, add box, icon size 25, color is white, on pressed, async, and we're basically setting it like this. So what we're doing here is we're setting an icon button, and this is gonna hold the add food button. So right here, this button right here is coded, represented by this widget, which we're defining. Next, we can go to the add food, show food add method, and this is basically the modal that you see. When I click on the plus icon, we can see a modal that pops up. And this modal is created by this logic here. So show food to add, show dialog. And we're going to say show the content of amount had. And in amount add, we're basically returning a scaffold widget, and we're going to call show add food form. And in show add food form, we're going to show this form. So the form is basically the calories for the date, and then the actual date itself. So now we can build this. Since it's pretty simplistic, I'm going to copy and paste, but I will go over it. So we have column and we have children. So we have a text form field, and it's part of the form widget. And we have text form field. This is the calories. Please enter calories, and then we have a validator. So if the calorie amount is not entered and it's null, then we say this is not valid. And if it is valid on change, then we set the add food track calories attribute of this food track entry object to the value. And then we have date time field. So date time field is taken from the date picker form field library, and it's great because it allows us to render a date picker as shown here. And we're basically saying the initial date is now first date, or so the earliest date is 1900, latest date or the oldest date can be 2100. Then we're setting add food tracks date value to this value, and date time value is a field that's defined right here. So date time value is going to be defaulted to date time now. So now that that's done, we can move on to create date time series. Yes, create date time series data. This method is used to provide a list of sample food track entry instances as backup in case the Firebase instance is unable to fetch any food track records. So over here we can see we have an else statement. If calories by date time map is not null, then we render the calories by date map, which is what we received from this logic right here from the Firebase real-time database. Else we render result data, and result data is defined by this method right here. So basically we have 4 food track entries, and they're going to have a date time of these predefined values, and it's basically sample data that we can use as backup in case our connection to Firebase fails for some reason. Then finally we have our build method. So let me bring over the code here. And we have our build method right here. So basically what this is doing is returning a scaffold widget and rendering the form and the time series chart. So this is the chart that is used by this library, charts Flutter. It uses time series chart, and first argument is going to be the chart data, which we've defined as chart data right here, and it's going to set animate to true. If upon first initial load we haven't received the chart data in time, then we return a circular progress indicator to indicate the user to hold on while we fetch the data. So that's basically it. Finally, so we finished coding the application. Now let's talk about how we can run it. So basically, to run it, we just if you're using VS Code, this is going to be pretty straightforward. So let's go to Run and Debug tab. Select your project in the drop-down. So this is my project. If your project is brand new, then it's probably going to be over in the second list. Select that and launch.json file pop up. Select, I think it's Dart. It might also be called Dart and Flutter. It'll have Command P type of selection modal will pop up in VS Code. Just select Dart and Flutter. Once that's done, you can click the play button right here, and it'll ask you to select a database. It'll ask you to select an emulator. So right here we have Pixel 4, I think, emulator installed on my system. If you don't have an emulator, you'll have to look into how to install an Android emulator on your system. Once you can select that emulator, so yes, I have Pixel API 28, just select that when it comes up, and we'll be able to build the application. Now, the build process might throw errors, which is common when you're building a brand new application for the first time, and those errors will be displayed in the debug console. Errors will be in red, and basically let me know if you run into any errors in the comments, and I'll try to help. If not, then yeah, try to debug them to the best of your ability. And once you get it running, you should see a blank page. Then what we have to do is we're going to have to populate this chart. So basically populate it by entering some dates. And I say enter about five dates, because my chart is very populated as of now. It's gonna be hard to see in each individual instance, but yeah, this is what it should look like at the end, and that's basically how we can build a time series chart in Flutter. So hopefully now you have a better idea of how to implement time series charts in Flutter applications. If you have any feedback or criticisms, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, consider liking and subscribing. And thanks for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one.